Tonight on the Tread and Truth podcast, CBS put a national spotlight on chameleon carriers, corporate shell games, and trucking operations where safety can disappear behind paperwork. But what happens when the logo on the trailer stays the same and the accountability still gets buried? In this episode, we look at my documented Night Swift safety paper trail, a questionable annual inspection sticker, a cracked trailer rail, ignored safety emails, an overweight reload, a bald tire that failed pre-trip, and a stack of documents mailed to corporate legal. That mailing was signed for. The concerns were not meaningfully addressed. And later, after the working relationship broke down, Knight-related entities sued me in Maricopa County. This is not just a story about one driver, one trailer, or one bad week. It is a story about how contractor layers, lease purchase pressure, dispatch control, equipment control, and corporate silence can leave the driver holding the risk. Because in trucking, the driver is often treated like the final safety department until he says no. Then he becomes the problem. This is how the Squeaky Wheel Got Sued, CBS, chameleon carriers, and my Night Swift safety paper trail. You are listening to the Tread and Truth podcast.
So, have you ever played that classic street game with the three cups and the hidden ball? You know, the shell game?
Oh, yeah, where you're just frantically trying to track the one cup with the prize in it.
Exactly. You watch the dealer's hands, and they're moving them around, like faster and faster. But the real secret of the game, the reason the house always wins, is that the ball isn't actually under any of the cups you're staring at.
Right. They palmed it before the mixing even started.
Yeah. The whole exercise you're watching, like all that frantic movement on the table, it's just a distraction.
It's basically an illusion of participation, right? Like, you think you're tracking reality, but you're really only tracking exactly what the dealer wants you to see.
Exactly that. Now, I want you to take that concept, right, that deliberate misdirection of where the real object is, and I want you to apply it to an 80,000-pound commercial semi-truck, just hurtling down the interstate right next to your family's car.
That is a terrifying image, honestly.
It really is. And that's our mission for this deep dive today. We're building this on a massive stack of primary sources that expose exactly how this shell game is played, but like with human lives.
Right. And the documentation we have is just incredible. We're looking at a driver's personal essay called My Story.
Yeah.
Plus, we have timestamp photos of falsified inspection decals. We've got independent CCAT scale weigh tickets, internal text messages with corporate dispatchers, and actual federal lawsuit filings.
It's a huge paper trail.
Yeah.
And we're going to cross-reference this meticulously documented timeline of, one driver's absolute nightmare in August of 2023. And we're going to compare it with a major CBS 60 Minutes investigation into what the industry actually calls chameleon carriers.
Along with the legal briefs from a pending Supreme Court case, too.
Right. So we are going to completely deconstruct the invisible war taking place every single day on our highways.
It really is a war between massive corporate profit incentives, the demand to move freight as fast and as cheaply as humanly possible, and the actual physical, structural safety of the public.
The narrative we've uncovered here, it's basically a corporate thriller. But the bad guy isn't some comic book villain, right? It's a diffuse, completely unfeeling system.
Just a labyrinth of paperwork and unreturned emails.
Exactly. And layered corporate LLCs that act exactly like those cups in the shell game we talked about. They shield the top-level corporations from liability while just systematically pushing every single ounce of physical, legal, and financial risk squarely onto the shoulders of the individual driver holding the steering wheel.
It's wild. So let's dive right into the physical reality of this, right? Our timeline starts on Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. Our driver is operating under a lease purchase agreement with Night Swift, which is, one of the largest transportation conglomerates in the world. Huge. And he does what's called a drop-and-hook delivery at a Publix distribution center in Orlando, Florida.
Right. And for anyone listening who isn't familiar, a drop-and-hook is kind of exactly what it sounds like. Instead of waiting hours for warehouse workers to unload your specific trailer, you drop your loaded trailer in the yard, hook your tractor up to a different empty trailer, and you just drive away.
Yeah, it's designed purely for efficiency. Keep the wheels moving.
Exactly. So he hooks up to an empty trailer, specifically trailer number R52282, and he's dispatched over to the Knight Transportation Terminal in Lakeland, Florida. And his job is to just await his next assigned load.
And this is where the financial reality of the modern trucking industry just snaps shut on him like a trap. Because he gets to Lakeland and he just waits. And he waits. Thursday passes. Friday passes. The entire weekend just passes by.
And to really grasp the psychological pressure this driver is under from day one, we have to talk about the microeconomics of his lease purchase agreement, right?
Yeah, it's crucial. Under the structure, you're told you are an independent contractor, but you're only actually getting paid when the wheels are turning with a loaded trailer behind you.
Right.
When you're just sitting in a terminal yard waiting for the company to find you freight, your income is precisely zero.
But the bills don't stop, do they?
Not for a second. The fixed costs of operating a commercial truck are just staggering.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the weekly truck lease payment itself, which is often hundreds of dollars, and that's deducted straight from your settlement by the very company making you wait.
That's insane.
You also have commercial liability insurance, occupational accident insurance, heavy vehicle use taxes, maintenance escrow deductions.
It just keeps adding up.
All of these financial clocks are ticking 247. So when this driver is sitting there, attached to empty trailer R5-282 in a Florida parking lot for 5 days, he isn't just bored, he is actively hemorrhaging money.
He's going backward financially before he even buys a cup of coffee. He actually describes this period in his documentation as absolute purgatory. But finally, a load assignment comes through. He's scheduled to pick up a load of freight heading to Palmetto, Florida.
Okay, some good news.
Right. It's Monday morning, August 14th. He's finally going to get moving and stop the financial bleeding. So he steps out of his cab to do his federally mandated pre-trip inspection of the tractor and the trailer.
Which is standard procedure.
Very standard.
Yeah.
But as he's walking around the rig, he notices something completely bizarre. There is a brand new night preventative maintenance and annual federal inspection sticker applied to the side of his trailer.
Wait, a sticker that basically certifies the equipment has undergone a rigorous multi-point mechanical and structural diagnostic?
Yes, and legally cleared for highway operation. And it's dated that very morning, August 14th, 2023. And it's signed by a mechanic identified only by the stamp IJCAA.
Okay, the physical impossibility of this sticker is where the illusion of the safety system completely shatters. Let's look at the driver's environment for a second.
I doubt.
He has been physically attached to this specific trailer, R5-2282, sitting in a standard parking space for days. And he notes in his documentation that he was actually outside that very morning, standing right next to his truck, doing routine maintenance on a small auxiliary power generator that's mounted right behind his sleeper cab.
He's literally right there. He says he only stepped away a few times to, use the restroom inside the terminal building.
Right. And we need to explain why it is literally impossible for a ghost mechanic to perform this inspection in that tiny window of time.
Please do, because it sounds crazy.
A federal annual inspection of a commercial trailer is not just a quick visual walk-around. You must test the air brake system. And the only way to test a trailer's air brakes is to have the truck the driver is currently sitting in supply highly pressurized air through the rubber hoses, the glad hands, into the trailer's air tanks.
Okay.
The driver has to be in the cab pumping the brakes, observing the pressure gauges drop, while the mechanic observes the slack adjusters and brake push rods under the trailer moving.
So it's a two-person job, basically.
Or, alternatively, the mechanic would have to physically disconnect the driver's truck and hook the trailer up to a massive shop air compressor.
Neither of which happened. The driver never felt the rig move. He never turned on the lights to check the electrical system.
Exactly. You can't check the structural integrity of the suspension, the thickness of the brake pads, the internal pressure of 8 dual tires, and the operation of the ABS system silently while the driver's in the bathroom. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
The mechanic walked through the yard, found a trailer on their list, and simply slapped a piece of vinyl on the side.
And the documentation we have proves how incredibly mindless this whole process was. I'm looking at the time-stamped photos the driver took. The mechanic, IJCA, filled out the day of the inspection as 081423. But right next to that box is a space for next PM service due. The mechanic wrote 0223.
Wait. They backdated the next required service by 6 months into the past.
Yes. They wrote 23 instead of 24.
Oh my God. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes. It shows a level of rote, zombie-like processing. This individual wasn't inspecting a complex, heavy piece of machinery. They were literally just performing data entry on a piece of adhesive.
But it gets so much worse than just a typo. The driver's photos document the actual physical state of this trailer that was just certified as safe.
What was wrong with it?
Well, it had a torn mud flap, which is a violation right there. But far more critically, it had a visible vertical crack in the aluminum side rail. I'm looking at the photo from the source material right now. It's this jagged rupture tearing right along a rivet line on the bottom structural rail of the trailer.
And that bottom rail is not cosmetic. It is a primary load-bearing component of the trailer's architecture.
Exactly. And this fake sticker is sitting right there, essentially blessing this completely broken equipment.
Wow.
To put this in perspective for anyone listening who doesn't drive a commercial truck, imagine taking your car in for its mandatory state inspection.
Right.
The mechanic never takes your keys, never turns on the engine, never even looks at the tires. They just walk up to your car while it's parked at a grocery store, see that the front axle is visibly cracked in half, slap a pass sticker on the windshield, and walk away.
It's terrifying.
It is. So I have to ask, why would a terminal mechanic do this? Are we just looking at one incredibly lazy employee trying to clear a backlog? Or is this a symptom of something much larger?
The documentation points heavily away from an isolated, lazy employee and strongly toward a systemic mandate.
How so?
In the logistics networks of multi-billion-dollar carriers, terminal managers are evaluated on incredibly strict metrics, and the most critical metric is asset utilization. Essentially, how many trailers are available to load freight versus how many are sitting out of service.
I see.
A trailer with a cracked aluminum rail is a massive negative metric. Welding aluminum is not like welding steel. It requires specialized equipment like a spool gun or a TIG welder and specific inert gases,
Which I'm guessing most terminals don't have.
Many terminal shops aren't equipped for it at all, so that trailer would have to be sent to an outside vendor, which costs a lot of money and creates downtime.
So the sticker is basically a magic wand.
Precisely. Slapping that sticker on the side instantly transforms a broken, negative metric into a positive, available asset on a corporate spreadsheet somewhere. The mechanic is likely operating in an environment that heavily penalizes delays and rewards throughput.
The safety protocol isn't the goal.
Exactly. Processing the asset is the goal.
But our driver, he doesn't just accept this magic wand. He sees the crack, and he knows he's the one who has to pull this thing down the highway.
Right. He's the one taking the risk.
So it's starting to rain in Lakeland, and before he heads to the shipper, he pulls the attached trailer over to the actual physical inspection lane at the terminal. He spots two mechanics wheeling their tire inflation carts toward the bays to get out of the downpour.
Okay.
He points directly at the jagged rupture in the aluminum rail and asks them point blank, "Is this an issue?"
And their response?
They just look at it and tell him no. They verbally dismiss a structural failure on a 53-foot trailer and just walk away.
This is a crucial moment. The driver has now attempted to utilize the on-site safety infrastructure. He has pointed out a physical defect that completely contradicts the falsified federal decal, and the authorized personnel have told him to ignore it.
Yeah.
He is basically being conditioned to distrust his own eyes.
It's pure gaslighting. So he leaves the terminal and heads to the shipper in Palmetto. And this is where the time to think really becomes a burden. It takes the shipper over 9 hours to load his trailer.
9 hours of just sitting there.
Just sitting in his cab, staring in the mirrors, thinking about that fake sticker and the crack in the rail. He knows it's wrong. So he decides to escalate. While he's sitting there, he opens his laptop and types out a highly detailed email.
Good for him. Document everything.
He attaches the timestamped photos of the fake sticker, the typo on the date, the torn mud flap, and the structural crack. He outlines the entire timeline of the ghost inspection. And he sends this email not just to his dispatcher, but to his terminal manager, to the owner-operator department, and directly to the vice president of Safety for Night Transportation, located at their corporate headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow. He creates a formal, time-stamped, written record of safety fraud, complete with photographic evidence, and delivers it to the highest echelon of corporate safety management. That's a major step.
And you want to know the response from the vice president of safety? Absolute silence.
Nothing.
Crickets. Nobody replies. He waits 2 full days. On August 16th, he sends a follow-up email, again directly to the VP of Safety. In this second email, he references a history of issues, mentioning past problems with his medical card processing, and states he has a whole stack of documented problems he's tried to bring to management in person previously.
He's begging for accountability.
He is. And the irony is, I'm reading the source material here, and the driver actually quotes the company's own corporate culture page back to the VP in the email.
Oh, wow. Which is a brilliant way to force a corporation to look in the mirror. What does the manual claim?
The manual says, and I quote, "Looking good is nothing, but being good is everything. We are thrilled and invigorated when focus, attention, and even spotlights are shined on where we can improve. We have a saying here at Night, culture is not the most important thing, it is the only thing. This what makes us who we are," unquote.
The cognitive dissonance there is just staggering. This exposes the vast canyon between a corporation's public relations narrative and its actual operational reality.
Right.
They claim to be thrilled to have spotlights shined on areas for improvement, yet when an independent contractor shines a high-wattage spotlight on a falsified federal inspection decal and a compromised load-bearing rail, the culture they actually enforce is one of total silence. The corporate safety apparatus does not engage with the safety threat, they just ignore the whistleblower entirely.
The driver perfectly captures the psychological toll this takes. In his notes, he writes, "I think they are under the impression that spotlighting and gaslighting are synonyms."
That's a powerful quote, and we must emphasize how deeply that gaslighting affects a driver. If you are operating an 80,000-pound vehicle, your life, your commercial driver's license, and your financial survival depend entirely on the integrity of your equipment.
Absolutely.
When your partner carrier demonstrates that they are willing to falsify a brake and structural inspection, it destroys your trust in everything. If they lied about the brakes, did they lie about the wheel bearings? If the refrigeration unit engine fails because they skipped an oil change and the load of perishable food is ruined, the company will likely try to charge the driver's insurance for the claim.
Oh man, they push the cost onto him.
Always. The driver realizes he's entirely alone on the highway, absorbing 100% of the physical and financial risk, while the company holds 100% of the operational power.
And that physical risk doesn't stay theoretical for long. The physics of the situation catch up to the corporate silence pretty quickly.
How so?
This brings us to the next massive escalation in the timeline. The Indianapolis breakdown and the botched transload.
Okay, lay out the timeline.
It's now August 17th. The driver has been hauling this fully loaded trailer from Florida, making his way up towards Chicago. He pulls into the night terminal yard in Indianapolis, Indiana for fuel. While the tanks are filling, he walks around to check the equipment. He looks at the crack on the aluminum side rail. And exactly as you would expect, it has spread.
Of course it did.
The jagged line is longer and wider. The sheer weight of the freight and the constant vibration of the interstate are literally tearing the trailer apart.
This is the inevitable reality of mechanical fatigue. A crack in a load-bearing aluminum rail on a 53-foot trailer carrying tens of thousands of pounds is not a static cosmetic blemish.
Right.
Aluminum flexes differently than steel. Under the repetitive stress of highway driving, a crack propagates. The energy of every bump, every single curve, focuses right on the tip of that tear.
So he immediately texts his terminal manager in Dallas and says, "This crack is spreading. I need this looked at." The manager tells him, "Call breakdown." He calls breakdown, and they tell him to pull into the Indianapolis inspection lane.
Okay, so finally someone is going to look at it.
He pulls the rig into the shop, and the shop mechanics in Indy look at the crack and say, "We can't fix that. We don't have an aluminum welder here or any way to graft in new structural material. That's a major repair for an outside vendor."
The irony is breathtaking. The shop in Florida magically certified this exact crack as completely road-ready 3 days prior without ever stepping out of the office.
Yeah.
Now, because the physics of the failure have progressed to a point where it's undeniable, the carrier is forced into the exact costly scenario they were trying to avoid with the fake sticker. The trailer is legally and physically dead. This forces a procedure called a transload.
Right, and let's explain this, because I think people assume transloading is just like moving boxes from a broken truck to a working truck, like moving your couch from one apartment to another.
It's definitely not that simple.
Based on the driver's documentation and what you've explained to me, it is a highly sensitive process.
It's an exacting science, governed by strict federal weight limits and the laws of physics. When a shipper originally loads in this case, pallets of 48-degree plantains, they engineer the load. They don't just shove pallets into the back until it's full.
Yeah, that makes sense.
First, there are airflow requirements for refrigerated freight. There must be specific gaps between pallets so the cold air can circulate and maintain the cold chain. But more importantly, there is weight distribution.
Right. A commercial truck is legally capped at a gross weight of 80,000 pounds. But the federal government also regulates how that weight is distributed across the axles. Right, to protect highway bridges and maintain steering control.
Exactly. The standard limits are roughly 12,000 pounds on the steer axle, that's the front wheels under the engine, then 34,000 pounds on the drive axles, the double set of wheels under the back of the cab, and 34,000 pounds on the tandem trailer axles at the very back.
Okay, got it.
A 53-foot trailer acts as a massive fulcrum. If you place the heaviest pallets at the very front of the trailer, right behind the cab, it pushes immense, crushing weight down onto the tractor's drive axles. If you put them at the rear, it overloads the trailer axles. The shipper in Florida mathematically balanced the loading pattern, perhaps 2 pallets side by side, then 1 turned sideways, then 2 more, to ensure the weight was perfectly, legally distributed.
So, cut to the next day, August 18th in Indianapolis. A new dispatcher named Mark is on duty. Knight hires a local tow truck and recovery company to come into the yard to perform the transload.
Right.
They bring over a replacement trailer. And how do they move the pallets? They take the freight out of the back of the broken trailer, and they shove it straight into the very front, the nose of the new trailer.
Oh, no.
They literally flip the finely tuned, mathematically balanced loading pattern perfectly backwards.
The driver's standing in the yard watching this happen, right?
Yes. He immediately recognizes the disaster. He tells Mark, the dispatcher, "I'm watching them load this, and I am highly concerned the weight distribution is going to be a mess." The tow company finishes around 3:00 p.m., and they assure Knight management that they loaded it exactly how it was.
But the driver doesn't trust them.
Not for a second. And this is where he does the one thing that protects him. He gathers independent, irrefutable evidence. He takes his truck and the newly loaded replacement trailer straight to a third-party certified C scale at a TA truck stop in Whitestown, Indiana.
Smart move.
Let's look at the exact numbers from the printed scale ticket in the source material. His total gross weight is 78,960 pounds. So technically, the whole vehicle is under the 80,000-pound limit.
Okay, but what about the axles?
Look at the breakdown. Steer axle, 12,080 pounds. Trailer axle, 28,040 pounds. But the drive axle, 38,840 pounds.
Wow. The federal legal limit for that tandem drive axle is 34,000 pounds. He is nearly 5,000 pounds overweight on his drive tires. This is a massive, immediate out-of-service violation.
Let's ground this in reality for the listener. What does it physically feel like to drive a truck with almost 39,000 pounds pressing down on the drive axles while the trailer axles are comparatively light?
It fundamentally alters the geometry and handling of the tractor. When you overload the drive axles that severely, it can actually cause a pivoting effect, making the steer tires at the front of the truck feel light.
So you lose steering control.
Exactly. Your steering becomes less responsive, almost floating. Furthermore, braking dynamics are completely compromised. If he hits a patch of rain on I-65 heading to Chicago and has to brake hard, the immense concentrated weight pushing the tractor forward while the trailer is relatively light can cause a catastrophic jackknife. It's not just a paperwork violation. It is a physical danger to everyone on the road.
The driver knows this. He takes photos of the certified scale ticket. He also has his photos of the original loading pattern from Florida and photos of how the tow company ruined it in Indy. He sends the scale ticket directly to Mark, his dispatcher.
He's building a case.
Think about the survival instinct here. The tow company lied to management to cover up their lazy work. If the driver hadn't spent his own money at the truck stop to get a certified CAT scale ticket, it would have been his word against a vendor. Management would have just told him he was complaining.
This perfectly highlights how crucial it is for commercial drivers to utilize independent verification. Smartphones, time-stamped photos, and third-party weigh stations are quite literally the only defense mechanism a driver has against a system that is economically incentivized to gaslight them and cover up mistakes.
Right.
He used data to force reality onto a management team that preferred the illusion of a completed job.
But confronting reality is not what management decides to do. And this launches us into one of the most enraging parts of this timeline: illegal corporate pressure and the liability trap.
Oh boy.
Mark, the dispatcher, calls the driver. And Mark has escalated this. He has another guy on the line with him, a manager named Gabe out of Katy, Texas. Mark starts relaying Gabe's orders over the phone. Mark says, "Okay, they say just slide your tandems all the way forward and run it."
Okay, we need to explain tandem sliding. The rear wheels of a commercial trailer are mounted on a movable track.
Oh.
The driver can pull a pneumatic pin and physically lock the trailer brakes, then reverse the tractor to slide the trailer box backward over the wheels, or pull forward to slide the box forward. Moving those rear axles changes the fulcrum point we talked about earlier, shifting weight between the drive axles and the trailer axles.
Right. But the driver instantly fires back at this directive. He says, "What? Sliding the tandems forward, the 2 holes that I have left on the track is only going to move around 800 pounds. I'm almost 5,000 pounds over. You want me to run 4,000 pounds overweight on the drives the rest of the way to Chicago?"
He knows the math.
He does. Mark talks to Gabe offline, confirms the math is indeed impossible, and then comes back with the ultimate trap. Mark says, "Gabe used to drive and he said he would do it. We'll pay any tickets."
Wow, we'll pay any tickets.
Let's pause right here, because if you've never worked in commercial freight, you hear this, and you probably think, well, if your boss, the massive corporation that controls your freight and your lease, tells you, hey, just drive it, and if the DOT pulls you into a weigh station and writes a ticket, we promise to pay the fine 100%, why doesn't the driver just do it? Isn't the carrier the ultimate authority? What's the big deal if the company eats the financial penalty for being overweight?
That assumption is the most dangerous, misunderstood dynamic in the entire logistics industry. It is the core mechanism of the liability trap.
Tell me about it.
The carrier is not the legal authority of the truck's compliance on the highway. The driver is. The driver holds the commercial driver's license, the CDL.
So the driver is basically the captain of the ship.
Precisely. Under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA regulations, the ultimate legal, civil, and criminal responsibility for the safe operation of that vehicle rests entirely on the individual sitting behind the steering wheel. Let's play out the reality of Gabe's offer.
Okay, let's play it out.
The driver says, "Okay, Gabe, you'll pay the ticket." He drives onto the interstate, 4,000 pounds overweight on his drives. He hits that rainstorm in Chicago we talked about because the physics of his tractor are compromised. He can't stop in time, and he rear-ends a passenger car, causing a fatal accident.
Oh, man.
The police arrive. The DOT investigators arrive. They pull the scale tickets. They see he was knowingly driving a severely overweight vehicle. Who goes to prison for vehicular manslaughter? Is it Gabe, sitting in an air-conditioned office in Katy, Texas?
Definitely not Gabe.
No, Gabe will say the driver is an independent contractor who made his own operational choices. The driver goes to prison. The police do not care that a dispatcher promised to pay a fine over the phone.
Right.
To a multi-billion-dollar corporation, a $500 overweight ticket is just a minor business expense, cheaper than paying a crew to transload the trailer again. But the points on the CDL, the permanent criminal record, the destruction of a life risk, is borne 100% by the driver.
The driver sees right through this. His documentation contains a quote that just cuts to the bone of this entire industry. He writes, "This is how new drivers get in bad situations. They think the carrier is the boss and get pressured into doing stupid or illegal things. The driver is in charge. Your desk isn't 80K pounds flying down the interstate."
It perfectly encapsulates the psychological warfare at play. You have a driver who is trying to faithfully balance his mandatory federal safety duties against extreme corporate pressure.
He's trying to do the right thing.
He's exhausted, he is stressed, he has been unpaid for all this breakdown time, and his own management, the people who control his lease and his access to freight, is actively pressuring him to break federal law simply to save them the hassle and cost of fixing their vendor's mistake.
So the driver holds the line. He refuses. He says, "I am not going to haul this trailer illegally to Chicago for you." But manager doesn't just say, "Okay, our bad, we'll fix it."
Of course not.
The extortion starts. The driver tells Mark, "Look, I have lost my entire weekend to your broken trailer and your botched transload. Just let me drop this heavy trailer here in Indy. Let me grab an empty trailer from the yard and let me drive 400 miles to Wisconsin to pick up my next pre-planned load so I can actually make some money this week."
That's a reasonable request.
Mark replies that he is allowed to do that, but the company will not pay him for those 400 empty miles to Wisconsin. Mark says they are labeling the move as willful repositioning.
Oh, wow. We have to analyze the economic cruelty of that term. In typical dispatch operations, the rate sheet contractually obligates the carrier to pay the driver a per-mile rate for moving empty trailers at the company's direction.
Right. Deadhead miles.
Exactly. But here, the dispatcher is weaponizing the driver's pay to punish him for refusing an illegal directive. By inventing the label willful repositioning, management frames the driver's desperate attempt to salvage his week's income and get to his next assigned load as a voluntary, unpaid personal vacation.
It's disgusting.
It is a textbook example of financial extortion designed to force a driver to comply with unsafe acts out of sheer economic starvation.
It makes you wonder, aren't there federal laws against this? What about whistleblower protections?
On paper, yes. There are current federal whistleblower protections under OSHA and the Surface Transportation Assistance Act, or STAA. They explicitly forbid a motor carrier from retaliating firing, withholding pay, or terminating a lease against a driver who refuses to violate commercial motor vehicle safety regulations. The law is clear. You cannot punish a driver for refusing to drive an overweight truck.
But the reality is different.
The practical application of those laws is incredibly bleak for an individual. To use those protections, a driver has to formally file a complaint, hire a lawyer, and endure a federal investigation that can take months or years.
Who has time for that?
Exactly. In the meantime, the company stops giving them good freight, starves them out, and terminates their truck lease. They lose their income immediately. The law could eventually vindicate them, but in the present moment, utilizing those protections means unpaid downtime, immense stress, and potential bankruptcy. For a guy just trying to make his $800 weekly lease payment and feed his family, fighting a corporate legal department is an impossible burden. The companies know this, which is why the pressure tactics continue.
So, unable to fight a multi-year legal battle right then and there, and unable to afford driving 400 miles for free, the driver just waits in Indianapolis for them to fix the transload. Which takes us to the next absurd chapter. The gas forklift, the bald tire, and systemic disregard.
Okay, what happens next?
It's the next day, August 19th. Knight finally forces the local tow company to come back and fix their transload mistake. And how do they go about it? The driver's taking photos of this too. The tow crew drives a gasoline-powered forklift right into the back of the refrigerated trailer.
Wait. A sealed environment loaded with premium plantains that are mandated to be kept at a constant 48 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes. The driver texts his dispatcher a photo of this happening. He writes, "This is a gasoline-powered forklift idling. Smells like a car from the 70s, doors wide open, that temp recorder in the sunshine."
And how did dispatch react?
Mark, the dispatcher, replies with a joke. He says, "Getting the sunshine treatment." "What is it? Pineapple?" The driver just texts back, "Plantains."
The absurdity and disregard for basic safety standards here is just staggering. Let's look at it from a food safety perspective. Running a combustion engine, an engine emitting carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, and unburned hydrocarbons inside a confined food-grade container holding fresh produce is a massive violation of the Food Safety Modernization Act.
Right. The exhaust fumes are literally coating the cargo.
Furthermore, the integrity of the cold chain is completely broken by leaving the thick, insulated reefer doors wide open to the August Indiana heat. The shelf life of that product is being actively destroyed. The driver is forced to helplessly observe the systematic degradation of the very cargo he is contractually responsible for protecting.
And he notes the deep financial insult of it all. He's watching these guys ruin the freight, and he texts Mark, "Pretty funny how the tow truck probably gets a couple grand for this, and I'm boots on the ground getting maybe $100 once owner ops comes back."
That really stings.
But the story of the original broken trailer isn't over. On August 22nd, after the driver finally gets unhooked from this cursed load, still completely unpaid for days of breakdown time — by the way, he's walking through the massive terminal yard in Indy — he realizes something. The original cracked trailer, R52282, is missing from the spot where he parked it.
Uh-oh.
He wanders around the labyrinth of the yard and eventually finds it. It is connected to another contractor's truck.
The exact same broken trailer that the Indy shop mechanics explicitly stated they could not fix because they lacked an aluminum welder.
Yes. The driver's notes say he explicitly asked the shop management to red tag the trailer or place a physical lockout device on the glad hands so no one else would unknowingly take it. They ignored him.
Wow.
He finds the new contractor parked with his sleeper curtains drawn, probably asleep, totally unaware he is now hooked up to a trailer with a propagating structural crack on a main load-bearing rail. The driver realizes that all his delay, his lost money, his refusal to run illegally, it didn't fix the problem. It just passed the buck. Management simply allowed the trailer to be placed back in the available pool, letting another unsuspecting driver absorb the physical risk.
This specific incident exposes one of the most critical gaps in federal enforcement. Terminal managers possess the absolute authority and the duty to red tag or lock out unsafe equipment. When they deliberately choose not to, when they send a broken trailer back into the dispatch pool, they are actively facilitating illegal and dangerous operations.
But how do they get away with it?
The problem is that the FMCSA relies almost entirely on random roadside inspections or weigh scales to catch violations. But terminal-level maintenance fraud, the act of knowingly allowing damaged equipment to be dispatched from a private, fenced-in corporate yard, is incredibly difficult to police. Federal inspectors aren't constantly patrolling private corporate properties. The terminal acts as a regulatory black box where known safety issues simply disappear into the system until they cause a crash on the highway.
It's just endless. So our driver finally gets out of the Indy yard. He is dispatched to a Nestle distribution plant in Anderson, Indiana, to pick up a newly assigned preloaded trailer R51727. He arrives, hooks up, and begins his pre-trip inspection. He immediately notices the side of the trailer has massive cosmetic scrape damage, which he diligently photographs. But then he looks at the tires.
What's wrong with the tires?
One of the dual tires on the trailer is completely, undeniably bald. There's absolutely no tread depth left. The underlying wire casing is practically showing through the rubber. So, once again, doing his job, he calls the breakdown department. And what is breakdown's response to a bald tire on an 80,000-pound rig?
Let me guess. They tell him to drive it anyway.
The dispatcher looks at his screen and says, "Well, it still holds air. Can't you save us the service call and limp it 7 miles down the interstate to a Love's truck stop?"
Limp it 7 miles down the interstate. I mean, the audacity.
Right.
A completely bald tire on a vehicle of that mass is a catastrophic blowout waiting to happen. If a trailer tire detonates at 65 miles per hour, it doesn't just go flat. It explodes. It sends massive chunks of heavy rubber shrapnel flying across lanes, which can easily shatter a passenger car's windshield. It can cause the rig to swerve or lose control.
The driver, of course, refuses the order. He forces Knight to pay for a mobile repair truck to come out to the Nestle lot and replace the tire before he moves an inch. But we have to step back and look at the cumulative effect of this single week. In just a handful of days, this one driver dealt with a falsified federal inspection sticker on a cracked trailer, mechanics who ignored him, executives who ghosted him, a botched overweight transload, extreme pressure to drive illegally, threats of unpaid miles, exhaust fumes blowing on human food, a broken trailer being secretly reassigned, and finally, an order to drive on a bald tire.
It's just nonstop, and we must evaluate how this relentless cycle of equipment failure and corporate pressure impacts long-term driver retention and overall industry safety. The driver bluntly states the brutal math of his week in a text message to his manager. He writes, "I got paid $40 for my 7 days of work, so that's pretty cool."
$40. For a week of his life living in a metal box fighting to keep the road safe.
When a driver is an independent contractor, their revenue is tied entirely to miles driven, but their fixed costs are tied to time. When equipment constantly fails, and we just documented 3 separate trailers with major issues in 1 week, the driver absorbs 100% of the financial shock. The company loses a little efficiency, but the driver loses their livelihood.
They just sit there.
They sit in staging lots, waiting for tire repairs, waiting for transloads, waiting for management to make decisions, making $0 while their lease payments and insurance costs accumulate. This is not just an inconvenience. It is a systemic, structural failure that bankrupts drivers.
And it drives the good ones out, doesn't it?
Exactly. The tragic result is that it forces the most experienced, the most safety-conscious professionals, the ones who actually check their tires and refuse to drive overweight out of the industry entirely. They quit because they can't afford to be safe. And who does that leave behind? It leaves a workforce composed entirely of individuals desperate enough or inexperienced enough to accept the fake stickers and drive the unsafe equipment.
Which is the perfect transition to zooming out. Because if a massive, publicly traded, known entity like Knight-Swift, a company with a dedicated corporate safety department and thousands of trucks, operates with this level of disregard in the broad daylight, what in the world is happening in the shadows of the trucking industry?
That is the exact premise of the recent CBS 60 Minutes investigation spearheaded by Bill Whitaker, which we are using to contextualize this driver's story. The report zoomed out from individual corporate terminals to focus on a broader, industry-wide safety epidemic, a phenomenon federal regulators call the chameleon carrier.
Let's clearly define what a chameleon carrier is for the listener, based on the CBS report. The business model is incredibly cynical, and it relies entirely on exploiting the gaps in federal oversight. You start a trucking company. You focus purely on revenue and speed. You run your fleet into the ground. You skip maintenance, you ignore bald tires, you push your drivers to run past their legal sleep limits. Predictably, your trucks get pulled over, and you rack up hundreds of federal safety violations, out-of-service orders, and massive DOT fines. Your safety score tanks, and insurance companies refuse to cover you. But instead of paying the fines or fixing the safety culture, what do?
You dissolve the company. You completely shut it down on paper. You declare it defunct, and then the very next day, you reincarnate. You register a new LLC, you apply for a new Department of Transportation or DOT number, and you start operating the exact same broken trucks, with the exact same exhausted drivers from the exact same dispatch office.
It's literally the shell game.
Exactly. On the federal database, you appear as a brand new entity with a pristine, spotless safety record. You are a chameleon, changing its colors to evade predators, in this case, federal safety regulators and liability lawyers.
The scale of this problem is absolutely terrifying. 60 Minutes interviewed Rob Carpenter, a trucking safety consultant and former highway patrolman with 25 years of experience. He cited data estimating that out of the roughly 700,000 trucking companies currently operating in the United States, between 10% to 20% are operating somewhere on the chameleon carrier spectrum.
That's a huge percentage.
That means there are potentially tens of thousands of rogue fleets actively sharing the highway with our families, hiding behind fake names.
And the regulatory oversight is shockingly, almost comically inadequate to handle this volume of fraud. The CBS report noted that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the sole federal agency tasked with policing the entire commercial trucking industry, only has about 350 investigators for the entire country.
The 350 investigators for 700,000 companies. That is mathematically impossible. I have to ask, how is it physically possible to just erase your safety record? I mean, we live in the era of big data. If a truck has a unique vehicle identification number, a VIN, shouldn't the violations permanently follow the physical truck or the owner's social security number?
You would logically think so. But the system was designed decades ago for a different era, and it hasn't kept up with digital fraud. As Derek Bars, the administrator of the FMCSA, admitted to 60 Minutes, their registration system is functionally 40 years old. They have what he explicitly calls a front door problem.
What does that mean?
The system relies heavily on the honor system self-certification when someone registers for a new DOT number online. Fraudsters easily exploit this. They use slightly altered names. Smith Trucking becomes Smith Logistics. They use different residential addresses, or they put the new company in the name of a spouse or a proxy owner to bypass the automated database checks. There is no biometric tracking, no deep financial auditing at the point of entry.
So they just walk right in.
Exactly. By the time the FMCSA's 350 investigators manually connect the dots and realize the new company is actually the old dangerous company, the chameleon carrier has already been running on the road for 6 months, racking up new violations and causing crashes.
The 60 Minutes piece highlighted one of the most notorious networks currently under federal investigation to show how brazen this gets. It's a network called Super Ego Holding. This is a massive, complex web of trucking and leasing companies based partly in the U.S. and partly in Belgrade, Serbia.
Serbia?
Yeah. The details provided by the whistleblower, Daniel Sanchez, who was a former driver for them, are straight out of a mob movie. Sanchez told CBS that when the company's safety score got too low and they needed to shed an identity, management would simply email him a picture of a new company name and a new freshly minted DOT number. They told him to print it out on a piece of standard printer paper and literally stick it onto the side of his truck door using duct tape.
Duct tape over the old federal ID. It perfectly physically symbolizes the absolute fragility of our regulatory enforcement. But the superego case goes far beyond just avoiding maintenance fines. It involves sophisticated international fraud that directly overrode federal safety systems and endangered lives.
Yes. This part blew my mind. The report detailed how managers sitting at desks in an office in Belgrade, Serbia, were illegally logging into the federally mandated electronic logging devices, the ELDs, installed inside the American trucks.
That's incredibly dangerous.
By law, every commercial truck has an ELD connected to the engine that tracks exactly how long the truck is moving.
Okay.
A driver is strictly limited. For example, they can only drive 11 hours before they are legally required to take a 10-hour rest break to prevent highway hypnosis and fatigue. These Serbian dispatchers were remotely hacking into the system, resetting the time clocks and zeroing them out so that exhausted American drivers appeared legal on paper and were pressured to keep driving endlessly.
This perfectly illustrates the core theme we've been tracking from the very beginning. Corporate financial incentives completely overriding mandatory federal safety procedures. In the night transportation example, the corporate incentive was avoiding the cost of a specialized aluminum weld, or the cost of paying a driver for empty, willful repositioning miles. In the superego example, it is maximizing asset utilization by forcing a human being to drive beyond the limits of physical exhaustion. The mechanism is different, a fake sticker in Florida versus a hacked ELD in Serbia, but the underlying logic is identical.
And the extreme profit motive driving this behavior is undeniable. Bill Whitaker interviewed a second whistleblower in Europe who had his face hidden and his voice altered for safety. This whistleblower revealed that dispatchers in the Serbian office actually had an internal competition to see who could steal the most money from their own drivers.
Wow, stealing from their own drivers.
They would illegally alter the rate confirmation sheet from the broker that dictates the payout for the load. The dispatcher would artificially cut the rate shown to the driver, essentially skimming up to 32% of the driver's pay directly into the company's pockets. The whistleblower stated that this systematic wage theft alone netted the company between $1 and $2 million a week.
$1 million to $2 million a week, generated purely by extorting the workforce that is carrying all the physical and legal risk. Connect that perfectly back to our driver sitting in Indianapolis making $40 for a week of work while dealing with broken trailers. The entire system, whether it's a massive legitimate carrier using lease purchase agreements or a shadow chameleon carrier using hacked ELDs, is structurally designed to funnel profits upward to the corporate holding company while pushing all the delays, the repair costs, the legal liability, and the sheer physical exhaustion downward onto the individual driver.
Which leads us directly into the darkest part of this reality, the corporate shield and legal accountability. Because this isn't just a story about drivers losing money or dealing with stress. This system has tragic, irreversible, real-world consequences. We have sources from a CBS Sunday morning segment that aired around the same time as the 60 Minutes piece. It detailed the horrific story of the Bone family from Ohio. On Christmas Eve of 2022, 5 members of the Bone family were killed in a devastating multi-vehicle crash caused by a commercial semi-trailer.
And the subsequent investigation revealed the grim reality. The truck that caused that crash was operated by a chameleon carrier. It was a company that legally should not have been on the road, a company operating under a newly shed identity, specifically to evade the consequences of its past safety failures.
Now, here is where the legal accountability aspect gets incredibly murky and where we see the shell game played at the highest levels of the legal system. The freight that this chameleon carrier was hauling that day was not generated by them. It was dispatched by C.H. Robinson, which is the largest freight broker in North America. A freight broker acts as the middleman between the shipper who has the goods and the trucking company that moves them. The law firm for truck safety, representing the grieving Boehm family, filed a lawsuit that is now heading to the U.S. Supreme Court, a massive case called Montgomery v. Carib Transport II.
The central legal issue in the Supreme Court case revolves around broker liability and a doctrine known as negligent selection, which brokers counter with plausible deniability. Rena Leiserman, one of the attorneys representing victims, points out a structural flaw in the industry. Freight brokers are massive data companies. They have immense analytics at their fingertips, they do their homework, they track carrier performance meticulously. They often know exactly who they are hiring.
Right, they see the data.
But their economic incentive is to choose the cheapest possible carrier to maximize their own profit margin on the load. And the cheapest carrier is often the chameleon carrier that skips maintenance and pushes drivers illegally. Leiserman argues that even when brokers suspect or flat out know it's a chameleon carrier, they hire them anyway to save a few bucks.
And when a tragic crash occurs, what does the broker do? They walk into court, they point to the FMCSA database showing the carrier's seemingly clean but entirely new and fraudulent DOT number, and they claim plausible deniability. They argue, hey, we just brokered the freight. We aren't the safety police. The federal government said their DOT number was active, so we have no legal responsibility for their safety practices. They use the government's own flawed database as a legal shield.
They use the layered system to distance themselves from the blood on the highway. And we see this exact concept of the corporate shield mirrored back in the documents from the night driver we've been following. In his essay, My Story, Life Inside the Night Swift Contractor System, he points out that layering corporate entities is, in itself, a legalized, sanitized form of the chameleon model. It is designed to shield the parent corporation from the actions occurring on the ground.
He provides a specific documented example of this from his own paperwork. He notes that his truck lease named Night Transportation, Inc. as the official operating carrier, but in daily practice, he hauled freight for an entity called Night Refrigerated, LLC. He writes that when a dispute happens like a botched transload or unpaid miles, this deliberate mismatch in corporate entity names becomes a legal fog bank. It allows the massive parent corporation to distance itself from the actions and liabilities of its subsidiaries.
He breaks down the fundamental illusion of the independent contractor status under these lease purchase agreements perfectly. For listeners, if you ever see a billboard or an ad telling truckers to be your own boss by leasing a truck from a mega carrier, listen to the reality this driver documented. He states that he was treated exactly like a company driver operationally. He had to go to the specific terminals they dictated. He had to take the specific loads they planned. He had to wait in purgatory when they forced him to wait. The company retained 100% of the operational control of an employer. But financially, he carried all the risk of an owner-operator. He paid for the fuel. He paid the truck lease out of his own pocket while sitting idle for days during their botched transloads.
It is a brilliant structure designed by lawyers to privatize the gains and socialize the losses. The carrier controls every lever that determines revenue, but the driver assumes all the fixed costs and the legal liability of the CDL. And what happens when a driver finally has enough? What happens when a driver tries to push back using the company's own purported culture of safety, spotlighting issues through the proper channels?
They get crushed by the machine. We see the final outcome of the timeline we've been tracking. On August 29, 2023, the driver realized the system was never going to fix itself. He gathered all of his evidence, the timestamped photos of the falsified sticker, the emails ignored by the VP of Safety, the texts from Gabe telling him to run overweight, the CIT scale tickets proving the botched transload, the photos of the gas forklift and the food trailer. He packaged this massive stack of documented safety violations and mailed it directly to Knight-Swift's corporate legal counsel, Tim Overton.
He attempted to hold management accountable through the most formal, proper corporate channels available.
And the results. According to the driver's detailed documentation and legal filings, the safety issues were completely ignored. He states that Tim Overton refused to address a single one of his concerns. Instead, the driver found it financially and legally impossible to continue working under a system that demanded he operate broken, unsafe equipment. He stopped driving for them, leaving him unable to make his weekly lease payments. And what did the corporation do? They didn't fix the trailers, they sued him. Knight-related entities filed a lawsuit against the driver in Maricopa County Superior Court for breach of contract on the truck lease.
Now, to be explicitly clear to you listening, we are just impartially reporting the timeline, the documentation this driver provided, and the existence of this ongoing litigation based on the sources. We aren't taking sides or declaring a legal verdict in a pending court case, but we are looking at the mechanics of what he documented. And what he documented highlights a stark systemic reality. When an individual driver prioritizes federal safety regulations and public lives over corporate speed and profit, they face severe retaliation. The squeaky wheel didn't get the grease, it got pushed out of the industry and hit with a lawsuit.
So we have to ask the critical question, how do we fix this? What are the specific policy changes needed to dismantle this shell game, to stop this cycle of falsified stickers, chameleon carriers, and driver extortion?
It seems like it requires addressing the massive conflict of interest at the very foundation of the industry. Currently, as we saw in Florida, carriers are largely trusted to inspect their own equipment. A terminal manager whose annual bonus is tied directly to equipment availability and throughput is the one overseeing the mechanic who is inspecting the trailer. That is a direct, undeniable conflict of interest. Federal agencies must implement stricter monitoring of terminal-level maintenance. One major proposed policy change discussed by safety advocates is mandating independent third-party safety inspections nationwide.
Exactly. Take the inspection process out of the carrier-owned shops entirely. Remove the financial incentive to lie. If a truly independent, federally certified inspector had looked at trailer R52282 in Lakeland, Florida, they would have seen the cracked aluminum rail immediately. The trailer would have been placed out of service on the spot. The fake sticker would never have been applied, the driver wouldn't have been stranded, the dangerous transload wouldn't have happened, and the entire chain of events we spent this hour discussing would have been prevented at the source.
Furthermore, there has to be a technological way to crack down on the front door problem at the FMCSA. You cannot have 700,000 trucking companies overseen by 350 investigators using a 40-year-old database that relies on the honor system. There must be biometric verification, deep financial tracking, and cross-referencing of VIN numbers to ensure a bad actor cannot simply print a new DOT number on a piece of duct tape and erase a history of deadly safety violations.
And ultimately, there must be stronger, highly accessible whistleblower protections for drivers. A driver should not face immediate financial ruin, the loss of their truck, or a retaliatory lawsuit from a massive corporate legal team simply for refusing to drive a rig that is 5,000 pounds overweight on its drive axles. The legal liability must shift upward. If a dispatcher or a terminal manager orders a driver to run overweight or to ignore a structural crack, the corporate entity, not just the driver, must bear severe, immediate criminal and civil liability. Until the people in the offices share the risk with the people in the cabs, the culture will not change.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We started this deep dive looking at a single absurd moment. A fake inspection sticker applied by a ghost mechanic named IJC to a cracked trailer sitting in the Florida heat. But as we followed the thread of that single piece of vinyl, we uncovered an entire global ecosystem built on deception.
We journeyed from that Florida terminal to a botched transload in Indianapolis, to corporate dispatchers in Texas demanding illegal driving, all the way to international managers in Serbia altering federal time clocks and stealing millions from drivers. We've seen how the system is entirely purposefully designed to push legal and financial risk downward onto the individual driver, while funneling profits upward through a protective shield of LLCs and broker plausible deniability.
It's a heavy realization. We rely on these trucks for absolutely everything in our modern lives. The food in our grocery stores, the clothes on our backs, the medicine in our pharmacies. It all moves on 18 wheels. But the foundation of that massive supply chain is resting on the shoulders of individuals who are being systematically squeezed, gaslit, and endangered by the very companies that employ them.
And the regulatory bodies designed to protect those drivers and the public are vastly outmatched by the sheer volume of companies playing the chameleon game.
So I want to leave you with a final thought. Think back to that shell game metaphor we started with. We desperately want to believe that when a commercial truck is out on the road, it has been inspected, diagnosed, and certified as perfectly safe by a rigid, infallible system. We want to trust the sticker. But the next time you're driving down the interstate and it's raining and you pull up next to a massive 80,000-pound semi-truck hauling goods right beside your family's car, I want you to look at it differently. Ask yourself, who actually owns that truck? Is it a reputable carrier? Or is it a shell company hiding a history of crashes behind a newly printed DOT number? How many hours has the exhausted driver behind the wheel actually been awake? And is the only thing keeping that 80,000-pound missile legally on the road a piece of duct tape? Or a fake sticker applied to a broken chassis by a ghost mechanic who never even looked at it?
It changes how you look at the highway entirely, doesn't it?
It really does. You realize you're part of the game whether you want to be or not. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe out there on the roads, and we'll see you next time.
Mega carrier fuel cards are sold like a benefit. But for a lot of leased owner-operators, the real question is, who is the benefit really helping? A few cents off at the pump may sound good. Until the discount is tied to a network, the rebate comes later. The formula is hard to verify, and the fuel protection scale stops short of real-world diesel prices. That is why United Freight Haulers is putting fuel card information in front of drivers who want to compare the numbers for themselves. Do not just take the carrier's word for it. Look at the math. Look at the structure. Look at your options. Visit u-night.org today. That is u-night.org. Night is spelled with a K. u-night.org. United Freight Haulers, helping drivers ask better questions before the next fuel stop.